All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the video. My name's Jeremy Haynes, and today I've got a banger for you. We're going through all the top marketing lessons from advertising thousands of different high-ticket offers. That's products and services. You best believe there's gonna be some top lessons here that are applicable to your business that you're gonna be able to implement to help you make more money. All we talk about on this channel is helping you hit $1 million months. This isn't one of those guppy channels where you learn how to make $100,000 a month, a measly fucking 1.2 mil a year. We're trying to do $1 million in a month over here, okay? Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome in. Go check out some of my other videos after you watch this one. You'll get a lot of value from those too. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. Without further ado, let's dive in. So first of all, one of the top lessons that sticks out on this list to me, which has, believe it or not, been consistent over an entire decade of advertising different high-ticket products and services, is one very simple thing. You want to have what's referred to as a standout offer. Standout offers make or break all of your KPIs having a lot more flexibility in comparison to being extremely rigid and having to maintain specific KPIs as you scale, because you have an in-demand offer, a standout offer, something that people actually give a fuck to buy. There's a tremendous amount of offers that we've seen and even attempted to market over the years that, with just brutal honesty, after you advertise them for a bit, they suck. You know, people don't really give a fuck to buy them. And you'll know very quickly if you have an offer like that. Let me give you some examples of what can help you determine if you have one of these offers or potentially an offer that's going to shit the bed. So if you have really high show rates, this is as an example, let's say you're running a call funnel or a webinar funnel, or even like a DM strategy or something like that, where you have setters booking people into high ticket closing conversations. If you have really bare bones automations and reminder sequences, but you still average a really high show rate, really high show rates, to be clear, are somewhere between like 70 and 90%, especially today. In today's day and age, like literally right now while I make this video, the bottom of the barrel used to be about 50% for a horrible show rate. Now a horrible show rate can average somewhere as low as in the 30s, okay? That seems to be the new floor. I thankfully have not seen it less than 30%, but again, like some of the worst offers where you really have to do a lot of convincing, you find yourself having to do a tremendous amount of work and effort just to really sell people on getting them to show up. That generally is indicative that you have an offer that people might not give a fuck about. And again, when you look at all of the businesses that have made the most money the easiest, right? They have the least friction. And when I say they have a lot of flexibility to their KPIs, well, again, like if they implemented a lot of the best practices that we talked about on this channel to get show rates even higher and to get people more sold before they even show up, they're just going to benefit all the more. But in addition to that, because their show rates, their close rates, their cash collected per sale, their cost per call is already so good, they have a lot more flexibility for where those KPIs can fall to in different periods of the year, or different macro events that might happen during different times of the year where statistics kind of suffer as a result. Take Q4 as an example. A lot of high ticket businesses that do not have standout offers, where they have to do a lot to convince the counterparty to show up and buy, those offers, they have very rigid, strict cost per calls, show rates. They have very rigid and strict close rates at them. They have to have those. And they're already really close to being borderline on the edge of unprofitable if they fall below those key statistics, or God forbid, a few of those statistics fluctuate at the same exact time down against them, they'd be fucked. And a lot of businesses fall into that category during the Q4 timeframe. That's one of the biggest times that just routinely happens every year for 3 months out of the year, where you'll have some visibility into whether you're potentially that type of business or not. You know what I'm talking about if you've got a standout offer. It's like people, first of all, again, a lot of excitement in just response to your ads, high show rates, high close rates. Your salespeople are consistently giving feedback about how easy it is to close people, about how little resistance there is. People are showing up asking like a handful of buying questions first, and then they just purchase right off the rip, okay? Now that's not to sit here and say or diminish the fact that a business that doesn't have a standout offer can't work or can't thrive, but I just want to be clear with this number one lesson and principle. Having a standout offer literally makes everything else so much easier, okay? Now some of the things that also create standout offers that kind of are indicative of whether you have one or not, or how you can create one in the instance that you wanted to do so. You have to have an offer that already has some type of traction in the mind of your leads, okay? So your target demo already has thoughts about this offer. They already have like a high demand for something that can solve this specific problem, or they just already have thoughts about it in general. And I'll go into the differences. So your target demo already has has thoughts. And I'm leaving this open-ended like that because, again, it's definitive in a few different ways about this offer. Okay, let me give you an example. So when we work in the info product niche, as an example of one of the many niches that we service as a marketing agency, the real estate sector always has a very high probability to hit $1 million months, except for wholesaling. Wholesaling is awful because it's a very time and effort intensive offer. It's built for a poorer demographic because, again, it's not a capital intensive version of real estate. It's a time and effort intensive version of real estate. I could sit here and name drop a fuckload of different people we've taken to $1 million a month just in the real estate info product space alone. But instead of name dropping them so I can talk in a little more detail here, I'll describe what they did. We had one guy, commercial real estate offer, okay? People already have thoughts about real estate. Whether they want to buy or identify as a buyer for a commercial real estate info product or not doesn't necessarily matter for the premise of it being a standout offer. What matters in this case is that the demographic we're potentially selling to here already has thoughts that real estate creates wealth. It's a common belief amongst the general population of people out there. You likely have a very high probability to ask damn near anybody, from a McDonald's worker to a Walmart cashier to a kid going to college to a fucking grown man or woman working in a whatever job. Hey, does real estate create millionaires? Yeah, it does. That's what they're going to say to you. They have a very high probability to already have beliefs. When that occurs, no matter what it is, when the user that you're advertising to already has beliefs that something that you could sell to them is already going to be beneficial for them, you overcome a tremendous amount of selling that you'd otherwise have to do. And this is a great example. Like, we had an offer where somebody was trying to sell people on, we worked with this client for less than 2 months. We fired him. We gave it a shot. We thought there was a probability it could work, but we ended up firing him. There was this offer that was essentially telling people, hey, you could make money passively by selling businesses on like payment terminals. And if you got a payment terminal, like a payment processor in the hands of a business, and you got a percentage of every transaction that comes through as a result of getting that payment processor in the hands of that business, and you did that with many businesses, you'd create a great passive income for yourself was the hook of this offer. Okay, people don't already have a thought in their head about payment processors making people wealthy or rich or creating passive income off of it. That's a great example of an offer where you have to do a fuckload of selling as a result of people not having thoughts already about the offer. And when people hear it, like you might have just heard that for the first time, what naturally comes up in your head when you hear that? Is it, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm interested in that. For some folks, maybe, but for a lot of people, a lot of objections immediately come up instead. Like, how the fuck am I supposed to even get a payment processor in the hands of businesses? That sounds hard. Like, what am I going to do? And on top of that, this is the craziest part. These people weren't advertising towards business owner demographic that might already have a network. Oh no, they were advertising towards the general population. And they were advertising towards people who they could convince to purchase something that was upwards of $15,000 on, you know, hey, like, give it a shot, you know, see if you can go out there and network with some businesses and get them payment processors or terminals, you know, make a percentage of every sale that comes in. It's just a tough sell. And on top of that, as soon as you start advertising it, again, we gave it a shot because we don't want to be right. We just want to make money. And at the end of the day, you know, we do so in a very ethical way, of course. Like, we have ethics, we have morals. We don't just take on any random fucking offer. But again, in this particular case, I didn't necessarily know at first whether it would hit or not. So we gave it a shot. All the statistics were there that it was a brutal offer that was not going to work. They had a 30-something% show rate, bottom of the barrel. Again, that's very indicative that the offer is going to flop or that there's going to be a tremendous amount of selling required prior to the person just showing up and being willing to buy. You'd much rather, I promise you this, you'd much rather have an offer where the probabilities are stacked in your favor, that they already have thoughts in their head, therefore they're already more probable to buy. With the real estate offer, as an example, back to the commercial real estate thing, look, I could go out there and teach somebody, which we've done in all these different forms of clients we've helped, like the BRRRR strategy, where you buy, refinance, remodel, refinance, whatever. We've done residential flips. We've done the Section 8 real estate investment vehicle with our boy Tom Cruise up there. We've gotten a few people through that have like the remodeling, refinance model, short-term rentals, long-term residential rentals. We have a new one that's called co-living, which done really well. The point I'm attempting to make is simple. When we just say to people like, look, you already know that real estate creates millionaires. You know, it's one of the most common vehicles on earth for creating wealth, and you need to get involved in that. That's something that people already have as an agreed upon thought. That thought doesn't create objections. That thought is like an agreed upon thought where it's like, yeah, you know, that person's right. Dude, if you have an offer like that, that is tremendous. Okay. The The other version of this, where I say your target demographic already has thoughts about this, falls into the category of the in-market demographics. In-market demographics are people who actively identify as, I have the problem that your company can solve, or I desire the solution that your company proposes they can offer me. And again, people are just willing to pull the trigger. When you operate in big industries, your in-market audience or demographic is larger in comparison to really small niches. Like we have a few different people that we help where their target demographics are like literally tens of thousands of people. And out of an entire demographic and industry that's only tens of thousands of people big, at a given time, if you assume that 3 to 4% of a demographic is technically in market at a given moment, you'll literally have hundreds to thousands of people that are technically qualified to be in market, meaning they're actively saying like, yeah, I want to purchase this guy's stuff. Now, to be fair, that can be detrimental if you have a lower cost, high ticket product, maybe in the thousands as an example. If you had a recurring high ticket product, or in some instances, like we have an Inner Circle member right now where he's in that exact situation. His target demographic is like 15 to 20,000 people big. His in-market demographic of 3 to 4% would therefore be in the dozens, okay? Now, to be fair though, out of those dozens of people, he's literally closing people for millions of dollars a year per customer. See, that doesn't necessarily make a negative difference to him or negate him actively advertising to attempt to convert those people. And by the way, when he converts every additional customer, he tacks on far more than that in exit value, which is his true intention with why he's actively trying to convert more customers and why it's justified to continue to go after more of them. But again, my point is, if and when he reaches those people, the point I'm trying to make is they actively identify as, I need what this company offers, and they need it bad in his case. So they're happy to buy, they're happy to purchase. So in that particular instance, if I actively position my standout offer to exclusively be geared towards in-market demographics, I also have a tremendously higher probability to convert customers, okay? At scale. The downside to this, and the key lesson here I really want to emphasize, is some offers are so bad or people just don't identify with them in any way, shape, or form that you don't even have an in-market demographic. You only have a customer base of people that you'd actively have to convince to buy. You don't have anybody that actively says, that's what I'm looking for, that's what I want to purchase, which leads me into a transitional point for number 2. You have to have, okay, because this makes it a lot easier. You have to have an in-market demographic that you can exploit at all times. If you do not have an in-market demographic that you can actively sell to, right off the bat, you're going to have to spend so much more money, and your ROAS, your return on ad spend, is going to be dramatically lower. The companies that already have an in-market demographic, that's the easiest thing. It's the lowest hanging fruit. It's the simplest shit to possibly go after when you're considering getting into a specific offer, scaling into a high-ticket product or service, and making a fuckload of money fast with it in a sustainable way. In-market demographics are the clearest resolution for that. Because again, you'll have the highest return on ad spend, you'll have the most enthusiasm out of that specific batch of customers to buy, and most importantly, I just can't stress this enough, it's going to cost far less to convert those people and make far more, so therefore you retain much more profit. When you're initially scaling into a high ticket product or service of any kind, one of the key windows that's usually, kind of skipped over is this phase that we call accumulation mode, okay? Accumulation mode is pretty simple in terms of how it works. You're looking to do 2 things at once. Set aside a budget that you're essentially gambling on paid advertising, or maybe even testing organically first. You're going to accumulate profit that you reinvest and profit that sits in an account, okay? And these 2 things at once lead to long-term stability in the business. You're accumulating profit and reinvesting, as a result, a greater amount of ad spend to continue to scale. But at the same time, we want the bank buffer to grow. Our bank buffer, aka our profit buffer, gives us comfort. It gives us the opportunity to take far more risk. It gives us the opportunity to reinvest and therefore make a fuckload more money the next time that we advertise, because we're going to be able to spend more money, generate more customers, and therefore cash collect more, okay? Again, if we fail to actively and intentionally accumulate as we're scaling, what happens is really risky. Like, you can get the stool kicked out from underneath you at any time and end in this position where you're just on razor thin margins all of a sudden, you got no bank balance, you all of a sudden get kicked into scarcity mode. The whole point of accumulation mode is to avoid scarcity, okay? You take the worst risks or no risks at all. You're the most short-sighted. You're in survival mode whenever you're in this scarcity mindset. And generally, scarcity just comes from a thin bank balance, okay? Comes from thin margins, comes from failing to accumulate, comes from taking a big risk and essentially only reaccumulating the cash that you risked and barely anymore. You have to intentionally stay in this phase of accumulation when you're going through a high-ticket scaling process. Otherwise, you fail to scale. What generally happens to businesses that don't go through an accumulation mode intentionally is they end up only being able to consistently risk the same amount of money month over month over month. That's generally the clear sign that you're failing to accumulate. You're spending, again, maybe it's like $50,000 on ad spend, you're making back like $200,000 on ad spend. And with that additional $150 that you technically net, that's gross, by the way, minus your sales commissions, minus whatever other expenses you've incurred, instead of just taking the bulk of that revenue that you retain and splitting it in those two ways, reinvesting more into ad spend and accumulating into your bank balance, you'll do some dumbass shit instead. Like you'll hire the wrong people. You'll invest into the wrong things. You know, you might just squander the money on bullshit lifestyle stuff. And then again, the next month comes around and you're still stuck and you're wondering why 6 months later, you're in the exact same position. It's because you're not taking any consistently bigger risks month over month over month. Instead, all you're doing is taking the same level of risk, okay? Although yes, most human beings actively seek comfort more than putting themselves into high-risk, uncomfortable situations. When you're trying to scale to $1 million months with your high-ticket product, high-ticket service, whatever it is that you're selling, you have to understand taking a bigger risk the following month is what obviously leads you to a bigger amount that you accumulate the following month in cash, okay? You're gonna feel scared. It's gonna feel uncomfortable as you sustain the scaling the entire time, unless you stack a lot of these best practices on top of each other. That's what turns it into a comfortable situation where, yeah, you're still taking a risk, but you're not freaking the fuck out because you're avoiding scarcity mode. And again, the other side of this that I really want to emphasize is you have to understand bigger risks month over month are what lead to bigger amounts of revenue. Although it seems like right now you're probably sitting here like, oh, it's such a simple fucking lesson. Of course that's the case. You would be amazed of how many people come to us in our marketing agency or through our education company that are in that exact situation. I'm not exaggerating when I say that is literally a majority of the instances in which somebody comes to us. It's that exact scenario. We come in and we start pressing the fucking company on taking bigger risks. Yeah, it's gonna be a little uncomfortable, but again, those risks generally pay off when you're taking the risks with the right people in the right conditions, with the right KPIs backing that risk. See what I mean? Okay, next point I'm gonna make on, again, top lessons for marketing thousands of high-ticket products and services. And this is really important. It's avoiding the one-legged stool lesson, okay? There's a fine line here where you have to exploit what's currently working to its absolute maximum while also minimizing the risk of only scaling into one specific conversion mechanism, okay? And it's kind of like a twofold lesson in one, okay? So we want to scale whatever works aggressively, okay? And we want to do it quick. We want to consistently reinvest into it. But at the same time, the twofold lesson here is we have to avoid being a one-legged stool, okay? The one-legged stool logic is that, look, there's a lot of instability in having a chair that has literally one fucking leg on it, right? Think about how often in your life you've literally ever gone somewhere or even in your own home and had a chair that doesn't have at least 3 to 4 legs minimum that supports whatever weight you are. You know what I mean? If you had a one-legged stool, it's gonna be wobbly. And guess what? As you scale, the stool gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you know what that does? Gets even fucking scarier the taller the stool gets. You gotta be in a position where you scale the living shit out of what specifically is working best while also walking that fine line of trying to find another conversion mechanism that you could start to work into it. There's, unfortunately, more than half of the businesses that we've worked with that scale to $1 million a month. I talked about this in a video I referred to as the chunk method, by the way. The chunk method was the logic of avoiding being a one-legged stool, where we'll have a majority of businesses we work with where, no exaggeration, all the way up to 100% of the revenue, or in some instances all the way up to about 80% of the revenue, comes from just one specific conversion mechanism. And it might be a call funnel, it might be a webinar, it might be DM strategies, it might even be a low ticket to high ticket conversion mechanism. And then again, this other smaller percentile of the revenue comes from some other minority conversion mechanism, just a different funnel than whatever's currently making the most. The chunk method, which is essentially the greatest way to avoid being a one-legged stool, like sure, maybe half of your revenue comes from one specific conversion mechanism that does the best, gets you the greatest return on your ad spend, is consistently producing similar amounts of revenue month over month over month, similar KPIs. It's the most stable of all your funnels. It's the most stable of all your conversion mechanisms. But then you have another two that, yeah, although maybe they have ceilings, like maybe you've attempted to scale the other 2 or 3 conversion mechanisms you have, and you just find that after a certain amount of spend, they just stall and they don't convert as well, and they become problematic, simply put. If that's the case, you still want to reach a maximum amount of scale with those specific offers and conversion mechanisms and add another one after that. Because to be clear, here's the most important thing. When you do finally hit $1 million a month, you will sleep so much better when you have a business that has a few different key conversion mechanisms, a few different key ad channels, a nice even split between organic and paid, have an email convert a significant amount of revenue outside of just your paid ads directly converting, not having one fucking salesperson that converts all your revenue, having a nice spread between a few different salespeople that convert well. Simply put, it's like you can't have all your eggs in one basket, but at the same time, it's so important to note, if that is the case for you currently, you don't want to stall the scaling of your business just because that's the conditions of the business currently. You still want to milk the living shit out of whatever it is that you have all that risk essentially in, and you do want to maximize it, because as silly as it might sound to give that advice, obviously you're going to make more money as a result of doing it. That's the first and most important thing I want to point out. But the secondary thing to that, you accumulate more resources to be able to deleverage the risk, and you also accumulate more incentive to deleverage the risk, the more risk you technically take on from scaling up that one specific thing, okay? So the leverage to get away from the one thing being the only thing grows as the one thing scales. So it's technically a good set of incentives that unfold if you find yourself in that situation. It's not like problematic or troubling or, a situation where, again, you would choose to actively stall scaling instead. These are important considerations to make if you find yourself in these situations. Now, it's also important to note, I'm going to kind of make a sub point to this, although it does deserve to be its own point, given how powerful it typically is. Typically, one thing works the best over everything else by a lot, okay? And most of the time, although you won't want to admit this because it'll make you uncomfortable, it'll give you like a little feeling in your chest of uncertainty, which nobody wants to experience. But typically, one thing works best over everything. But, okay, and there's a big but that one thing eventually dies, okay? And that's why it's a sub point to the 2 points that I just made there. So I'll give you a great example. We had a client, this is back a few years ago. Now we're scaling up so aggressively. This business is like a couple $100,000 when we first found them. We get them over to a couple $1 million a month in under a year. And it's literally all through one thing. And that one thing was working so tremendously well. And I remember the client came, and by the way, it was all on one ad channel. It was all with a very specific set of ads. It was all with a very specific conversion mechanism and a very specific email sequence that ran the conversions. And dude, there was nothing else. I'm not exaggerating. There was literally nothing else. Like not even a small contributor of anything else driving the revenue. And I remember it was probably month like 10 or 11 and working with this client. And a client comes to me with like this shaky voice on the phone. And they were like, dude, I'm so fucking scared that this business is just going to go under based on how it's currently set up. Like we've got to get away from this one thing. Like we've got to incorporate like another offer or at the least like other ad channels and other conversion mechanisms. And that client did the right thing. They chose to hold me accountable based on this pie chart. Whereas literally 100% of the pie chart at the time that he started holding me accountable to this was from, again, that one channel, that one way of driving revenue to, okay, the new pie chart needs to be nice and evenly diversified. Like let's at least look at taking that one main conversion mechanism down to about 50%. And let's take these other 2 or 3 conversion mechanisms and let's get them through the chunk method to try to become, the other half. And then through time, like let's take that and let's diversify it even further. And this client, I'm not joking, it was like they had, what do they call it, clairvoyance, where they can kind of see into the future at a specific event through like a crystal ball or some shit. No joke. Like we start this process. We start the diversification. We start incorporating new offers. We start incorporating new channels. We started pushing organic a lot more than we historically had. And it took a good 3 months to get the ratio to actually look about like what this pie chart looks like here. And then no joke, we wake up one day sometime in December and this specific ad channel had gone down. And the worst part, this was during a year where that specific ad channel, everybody who worked there that was a plug had gotten sniffed out somehow and fired. So like everybody's plugs, and I'm not just talking isolated to us and our plugs, I'm talking like literally every fucking plug that existed that you could pay off to get an account back, to recover an account, had just gotten fired and didn't exist anymore inside of these companies. There were no workarounds. There weren't people to buy like agency accounts from. Dude, there was nothing. So again, this thankfully actually like didn't destroy the business like it would have if we were in this situation here. All it did was take down about half the revenue, which took the business from about 2.5-ish million a month to about 1 point something million a month instead, which that was what the business owner was trying to essentially set up in the instance that that main ad channel or something associated with that specific offer would happen. And they were right. Again, with their clairvoyance and their ability to kind of see into the future, they projected exactly what lesson I'm telling you need to start mitigating for right now while you actively run up the specific offer, the specific conversion mechanism, the specific ad channel that's working best for you right now. Yeah, keep that in the back of your mind, because at any point, yes, you can pay people off. Yes, you can get an account back. Yes, you can even pay people off to prevent disapprovals and ad accounts going down. A human being can still come in at any time and disapprove and disable your advertising assets. You could have some type of random new policy change that happens on these platforms. There's all kinds of stuff that could occur. And the point I'm attempting to make is clear, okay? Divest away from the one thing, but milk the living shit out of the one thing while you have the one thing actively working best for you, okay? Now, here's the other thing that happens a lot with high ticket offers. You do not want to be too reliant on closers, okay? Most high ticket businesses never develop the skill of being able to sell without having to push it through a closing team, okay? Although yes, closing teams are typically the best way to get conversions, and that's typically what you're gonna experience at scale. There are many different businesses. I can literally think of 24 off the top of my head right now as I sit here talking with you that do more than $1 million a month without a single closer on for offers that, without exaggerating, are probably same price, if not more than what you sell for right now. As low as about $3.5K, all the way up to $20,000. We even had one client in particular that sold a $40,000 offer straight to checkout after a 9-day challenge, okay? A 9-day live challenge funnel that they would do once a month that would convert about $1.5 million every time they do it. Not a fucking closer involved at all, solely through direct checkout. I can't stress this enough. Like, the business owners out there that become exceptionally well skilled at webinars, at challenge funnels, at essentially conversion mechanisms that don't involve closers, they can profit more, typically upwards of 10 to 20%, because again, that's what you're typically paying closing teams, is 10 to 20%. So when you have the ability to capture more of that revenue, it's important to understand you're increasing your profit margins dramatically, but you're also doing a really important thing, which correlates to the previous lesson I just talked about. You're mitigating risk of being all in on a closing team. The thing is with closers, as again, a majority of our clients that are doing more than $1 million a month and that we've worked with that do the more than $1 million a month are actively closing through closers, okay? And that's more than half that are actively in that exact position I just described. But here's the other thing. The businesses that are in that position, they know exactly what I'm talking about when I say this. The closers are human beings, and human beings have wild fluctuation. One of the worst things that happens with closing teams is the narrative going against you, okay? What I mean by this is, like, sometimes your closers are gonna get caught up on some stupid shit where they're all of a sudden gonna convince themselves that all the leads are bad, or like all the leads are all of a sudden unqualified, or some other version of a narrative, like, oh, people aren't buying right now because of this war or because of this shit going on. And although, yeah, could partially be true, that frame is going to dramatically impact the closer's performance, okay? If I, as the business owner, have a conversion mechanism that does not involve the closing team, that is solely executed through a webinar or through a challenge funnel as an example, or even through a group Zoom call by the business owner themselves doing a closing call presentation like that format, which we've also seen work tremendously well, you mitigate the risk of those fluctuations occurring in closer performance. Okay, if I can take that away from the closers, I open myself up immediately to a conversion mechanism that can be deployed if my closers ever go through that specific mental frame. If they start to get distraught, if they start to do poorly, if their performance starts to fluctuate negatively, and again, it starts to affect the profitability of the business, you should have the skill set as a business owner to scale up the conversion mechanism that does not involve the closer, okay? You should have the skill set to be able to take that essentially pressure off of them and through an incentive system show them, like, hey, you guys don't want to have consistent performance? Get fucked, I'm pulling it away from you, and I'm gonna close them myself. And then when you come in and you close everybody yourself, it immediately rectifies the narrative that they're trying to participate in. It also gives you the feedback that if they are right, you'll know they're right from being able to convert them or not convert them yourself. A lot of business owners don't take on that challenge. This kind of correlates into my next point I want to make, which is stay involved, okay? I have too many traumatic stories of business owners that when they're first getting their high ticket offers off the ground, they're extremely involved in whatever it is, okay? They're actively attempting to listen to sales calls recordings, again, build the skill of being able to convert on webinars or challenge funnels. Like, they're willing to commit time into the business, okay? And they're doing things that they'd otherwise consider like in the trenches. Sometimes even taking sales calls themselves when they get a new rep that they need to actively train, doing the sales training. There are so many business owners that fall under this illusion that they have to take themselves out of the business to work on some grand problem that doesn't even fucking exist yet, okay? Almost all of the highest revenue-driven actions that you can actively get involved with in your business when you're selling something that's a high ticket product or service is something that has to do with being in the trenches. Like being able to look like, dude, I have business owners. This is my favorite thing. I have business owners that will actively get on calls with me as an advertiser, go through what the click-through rates are between different ads, actively like taking notes on what's working and what's not working. They'll actively work with me on developing the ad hooks for the following videos, and they'll go out and they'll film them, and they'll care about the feedback of like what's working and what's not. They'll be involved in their sales teams. Like, yeah, they might have a sales manager. Who cares? The business owners that make the most fucking money are still, they're not micromanagers, but they're in the fucking trenches. They're in the weeds, like actively giving a fuck about the statistics of the different departments that are the most revenue-driven departments. And the 3 revenue-driven departments are pretty simple. It's like a little triangle, okay? You got marketing, you have sales, and then you have your operations team, okay? Your operations team is essentially your retention department, okay? This is how you mitigate refunds. This is how you ensure if you have some kind of a recurring component to your high ticket offer that you make them stick for long durations of time and lower your what am I talking about? Your attrition. In sales, this is obviously the gatekeeper to revenue, okay? If your salespeople suck, your revenue is gonna fucking suck. And then marketing, this controls who comes through the funnel and the volume, okay? So it controls essentially lead quality, and it also controls volume, okay? I can't stress this enough. You actively stay involved in all 3 of these different areas, you make so much more money than the people who do not, okay? The traumatic stories I referred to at the beginning of this point are so common for the business owners that start to fuck off. Like, they fall into this illusion of like, okay, I'm gonna hire the best marketer in the world, I'm gonna hire the best sales people in the world, and I'm gonna hire the best operations people in the world. And yes, that's a fucking great idea, by the way. But again, that business owner who does that in most instances will then be like, okay, thank God I can go fuck off, internationally travel, just spend time doing literally anything else besides being involved in the business. And even if you have the best people, give or take how they're incentivized, they'll never give as much of a fuck as you will because you have the most incentive over everybody else. I've literally never met a business owner a singular time that has, besides the ones that raise venture capital and dilute themselves to being a minority owner of their business. And all the businesses I'm referring to that have some type of high ticket product or service, they have the most rev share out of the total revenue that comes in. They get to pocket the most money comparatively to everybody else. So therefore, they have the biggest incentive over everybody else to make sure the business keeps chugging along, scaling up, and making more money. Yet for some reason, the pipe dream of almost every business owner is set up some kind of business that runs independently of you, and then you get to fuck off and spend less time doing it. I had a business owner just recently. We scaled them up. They were in July at about $200K a month from their paid advertising returns. By November, they were at $1.7 million a month. You know what they told me going into December? They said, hey, I'm only gonna give about 2 hours in this upcoming month to the entire paid media division. I'm not gonna spend more time than that talking to you guys. I'm not gonna spend more time than that on making ads. Like, I'm not gonna spend more time than that like auditing VSLs and decks and live webinar presentations. Hell, I'm not even gonna do live webinar presentations beyond that total of 2 hours. You gotta make it work. I literally called them an idiot. I used the R word. I said, you are fucking dumb. What are you thinking? You got a business from $200K a month to 1.7 mil a month, and now you're putting this stupid fucking restriction on your time? Like, how does that make any fucking sense? But they said, well, I want to test it and I want to find out. I want to see what happens. So, okay, great. Let's find out. Let's see how it goes. You know how it fucking went? Went awful, because a majority of that 1.7 million came from a monthly webinar they would do. A majority of that, by the way, they were spending upwards of $5,000 a day on paid advertising to a call funnel. A majority of that revenue came from the call funnel. Overcoming ad fatigue by filming new creatives upwards of twice a month was keeping their costs lower, was keeping their volume higher going through that funnel, aka it was keeping their advertising spend more efficient. What happened in the month of December as a result of that specific 2-hour time test was traumatizing. It was traumatizing. It was a catastrophic loss of revenue, okay? It was sad to see, sad to participate in, and such a dumbass hard lesson learned comparatively to how efficient, effective, and smooth everything was going prior. Again, a pipe dream to choose to fuck off in comparison to just staying overly involved. I could sit here and go on, and I do inside of my inner circle offer, where I do twice a month one-on-one calls, weekly group calls, 4 times a year we do masterminds right here in person in good old Miami, Florida. And on top of that, we have a group chat, very active, full of rich people trying to get a hell of a lot richer. You could also just message me through DM directly at any time, shoot voice notes back and forth, Loom videos, obviously just texting, whatever you want to do. We make you more money. It's the whole goal of that offer. There's a link in the description to apply. There are obviously minimums that you need to be making in order to qualify to get in there at all. And we'd love to have you in. Ideally, you're already doing a couple $100,000 a month, or even more ideal, you're already at the $1 million month benchmark, looking to tack on another $1 million. We got you covered inside of that offer. If you're already doing a good couple $100,000, you meet a lot of the criteria I talked about here, and you want us to come in as a marketing agency and help you out, we have an agency application down below as well. Although I will tell you transparently, without exaggeration, 99% of you come through the application we never even consider working with. And we're going to push you towards an inner circle offer or one of our education products, such as my Master Internet Marketing Program. Again, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, do me a favor, press that subscribe button and the little notification bell so you get notified when we drop bangers like this, all intended to help you hit $1 million months. Although your probability is exponentially low at 0.1%, lessons from people who have already been there, done that, like what I'm handing down to you now, definitely improve your odds a lot more than just trying to shoot in the dark and do it on your own. If you got value from this video, leave a like and a comment about what you got out of it, and go check out some of my other videos on the channel, all intended to help you get richer on your journey to $1 million month. I'll talk to you soon.